They say everyone's a bit mad, but the one who can analyze their own madness is called a philosopher. Diving into philosophy isn't a casual pastime, it demands your complete focus and dedication. Yet, the rewards are immense. It fosters a sense of personal evolution unlike anything else, empowering you to examine your own biases and question the very fabric of the world around you. My own journey into philosophy began during a period when I felt directionless, as if life lacked inherent value. I struggled with motivation and sought answers to fundamental questions about existence. Over the years, I've explored countless philosophical works, many of which have faded from memory. However, some have imparted invaluable lessons that continue to shape my perspective. Here are some of the most impactful insights I've gained from studying philosophy. Questioning assumptions. Many of our most deeply held beliefs rest on shaky foundations of unexamined assumptions. Consider questions such as, does a divine being exist? What constitutes moral right and wrong? Do we possess free will, or are our lives predetermined? Does everything occur for a reason, or is life governed by chance? Is there anything that exists with absolute certainty beyond our own consciousness? What is the meaning of life? These are among the most essential inquiries we can make, yet we often simply accept conventional answers or avoid exploring them altogether. For instance, I am confident that the moon orbits the Earth, but how can I be sure that the moon and Earth exist independently of my own perception? The famous saying, "All I know is that I know nothing," is attributed to Socrates, a key figure in Western philosophy. He was known for challenging the ideas of the sophists and questioning the established authorities of ancient Greece. Socrates employed a method of inquiry known as dialectic, which involved using questions to expose the flaws in commonly held beliefs. In Plato's early dialogues, we see him engage in such a dialectic with a man named Euthyphro, who is prosecuting his own father for alleged wrongdoing. Socrates probes Euthyphro about the very nature of wrongdoing, revealing that Euthyphro lacks a clear definition. This dialogue highlights a central tenet of philosophy, the importance of questioning pre-existing beliefs, including your own. The goal is to reach a point where you recognize the limitations of your knowledge and remain open to new perspectives and ideas. All I know is that I know nothing. Ancient academic skeptics argued that true knowledge is unattainable, except for our immediate sensory perceptions. Even then, they contended that only the raw sensations are certain, not any interpretations we place upon them. Acknowledging the vastness of what you don't know can open you up to transformative information and experiences. Death. It's easy to lose sight of our mortality. Our lives are filled with endless distractions that prevent us from contemplating the finite nature of our existence. When someone dies, many of us feel a sense of urgency to return to our daily routines, as if to avoid confronting the reality of death. Death can seem alien, unnatural. The idea of someone dying of natural causes can feel strange, as if there must always be a specific reason. Ancient philosophies, from Stoicism to Buddhism, emphasized the importance of remembering our mortality, believing it offered numerous benefits. It can lessen the distress caused by the inevitability of death, whether it's our own or that of a loved one. If we were constantly aware of death, would we engage in petty arguments, hold grudges, or waste time making enemies? According to Buddhist teachings, reflecting on death softens the heart, reminding us of our shared fate. Furthermore, contemplating death can inspire us to live more fully. When feeling unmotivated, the thought that our time is limited can spur us into action. Suffering. The concept of suffering, or dukkha in Sanskrit, as presented in the first noble truth of Buddhism, is more nuanced than our everyday understanding. The Buddha described 3 forms of dukkha. The first encompasses physical and mental pain, such as bodily discomfort and stress, the type of suffering we most readily associate with the term. The second form of suffering arises from the frustration of unfulfilled desires, the loss of what we cherish. The third is existential suffering, the anguish we experience due to the human condition, the awareness of our finite existence, and, in some beliefs, the prospect of repeated rebirth. The second noble truth elaborates on the origin of suffering: attachment, clinging, and avoidance. We desperately seek fleeting forms of gratification, such as new possessions or sensory pleasures. Our consumer culture often resembles a descent into dissatisfaction, as we are encouraged to pursue constant gratification through material goods. Many companies employ strategies like planned obsolescence to promote a throwaway mentality, where newer products are always deemed superior. We also develop strong attachments to family, friends, and romantic relationships, which can also be seen as temporary sources of happiness. People change, grow apart, and eventually die. Even our most treasured relationships are impermanent. We may use them as a means of escaping our thoughts and avoiding our existential fears. However, these desires only provide temporary relief, never lasting contentment, pain, and growth. This well-known saying is often misattributed, and its true meaning can be misunderstood. Originating from the German existentialist Friedrich Nietzsche, the quote is frequently used to justify a harsh, sink-or-swim approach to life. Those in privileged positions may invoke it to dismiss the struggles of those less fortunate, suggesting that social safety nets weaken society. However, Nietzsche's intended meaning was quite different. For him, the saying reflected his belief that overcoming pain is essential for personal growth. He lamented the tendency to shield ourselves from discomfort, believing that it hindered our development. Nietzsche's existentialist philosophy centered on the idea of radical self-growth, embodied in his concept of the Übermensch, or superhuman. He hoped his philosophy would help humanity transcend nihilism, which he saw as a consequence of the decline in religious belief. He urged us to embrace life in its entirety, the good, the painful, and everything in between, in order to define our own values, independent of traditional morality that, in his view, stifled our natural drives and instincts. Suffering in this context is an integral part of self-actualization. It allows us to discover our true capabilities. Without facing challenges, how can we truly know our capacity to persevere? But is it accurate to say that whatever doesn't kill you only makes you stronger? Not entirely. Physical injuries can certainly weaken us, and traumatic experiences rarely lead to increased strength. Trauma often makes individuals more sensitive and less resilient. However, even those who haven't experienced trauma can struggle with resilience and high levels of distress. Exposure to certain painful experiences can be beneficial to a degree. In exposure therapy, a form of cognitive behavioral therapy, patients are gradually exposed to their fears in a controlled manner, experiencing anxiety without becoming overwhelmed. This method has proven effective in helping people overcome phobias and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Such experiences can broaden our horizons, but excessive pain can narrow them. The optimal balance varies greatly from person to person. While some individuals emerge stronger after significant trauma, others are left deeply scarred. It's crucial to avoid generalizations. So while the saying isn't literally true in every case, Nietzsche's core idea that pain can play a role in growth remains valid. Existentialism. The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre articulated the core tenet of existentialism, that life's meaning is not bestowed by an external source, such as a deity, but is ultimately our own responsibility to create. This emphasis on individual responsibility is a defining characteristic of existentialist thought. It's important to note that belief in a divine being is not necessarily incompatible with existentialism. The Christian philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, for example, is considered an existentialist. Despite the central role of faith in his philosophy, Kierkegaard argued that simply being raised in a Christian household does not make one a Christian. Each individual must make a conscious choice to embrace faith, a leap of faith. Thus, even in Kierkegaard's existentialism, meaning remains the individual's responsibility, even if that meaning is found in a divine being. For atheists and agnostics, human existence can seem inherently absurd. The attempt to find meaning in a life devoid of preordained purpose. In his essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, Albert Camus likened this search for meaning to the myth of Sisyphus, eternally condemned to roll a boulder uphill, only to have it roll back down. Just as Sisyphus is destined to never reach the summit, we too may never find ultimate meaning in the face of the universe's chaotic nature. Camus described this fundamental conflict as the absurd. However, rather than succumbing to despair, he advocated embracing it. He criticized other existentialists for attempting to resolve the absurd by seeking refuge in faith, or attempting to find meaning in the meaningless. This raises important ethical questions. If life lacks inherent meaning, how should we treat one another? What ethical principles guide our actions in the absence of essential purpose? The French existentialist Simone de Beauvoir argued that we should treat others as beings of inherent ambiguity. We have a tendency to objectify those around us, reducing them to a limited set of possibilities, rather than acknowledging their freedom and complexity. By embracing the absurd, we open ourselves to a wider range of experiences and a more authentic existence. Systematic logic. This lesson may seem out of place compared to the others, which delve into more profound aspects of existence, but it is equally relevant from a philosophical standpoint. In his essay, philosopher Harry Frankfurt provides a concise definition of bullshit as speech intended to persuade, without regard for truth. It's evident that we are surrounded by this phenomenon, from politicians prioritizing agendas over facts to social media influencers exploiting attention for personal gain. While we may intuitively recognize it, philosophy, and specifically the study of logic, can equip us with the tools to navigate it effectively. Systematic logic, pioneered by Aristotle, is a branch of philosophy dedicated to evaluating reasoning. Logic provides a valuable framework for analyzing arguments and discerning sound reasoning from flawed reasoning in everyday life. Consider these two arguments. We should use dogs to find bones if they have a strong sense of smell. Dogs do have a strong sense of smell, therefore we should use dogs to find bones. We should use dogs to find bones if they have a strong sense of smell. Dogs don't smell very well, therefore we should use cats instead. One of these arguments appears more convincing than the other. But why? In philosophy, logic is employed both formally and informally to distinguish between valid and invalid arguments, and between sound and unsound ones. The validity of an argument refers to whether the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises. In the first example, the premises, dogs have a strong sense of smell, and we should use animals with a strong sense of smell to find bones, do support the conclusion, we should use dogs to find bones. In the second example, the premises do not lead to the conclusion. The soundness of an argument, on the other hand, depends on the truth of its premises. In the first example, the premise that dogs have a good sense of smell is empirically verifiable. In the second example, the premise that dogs don't smell well is false. Developing an understanding of logic has enabled me to critically evaluate arguments and determine their validity and soundness before accepting them. This has had a positive impact on my life.